Hello everyone, this is Dr. Vlad Krotov, and in this video lecture I will talk about managing projects within a broader organizational context. The key idea that I would like to convey through this lecture is that IT projects or any type of projects, they don't exist in isolation. Projects are carried out within specific organizations where you have people, where you have culture, where you have certain political, technological limitations. So a project manager cannot ignore that broader organizational context and carry out a project as if it was a standalone technical artifact. Now, to be successful in carrying out projects within organizations, a project manager needs to adopt the so-called socio-technical perspective, which means that as a project manager, you need to be both a technology person, not necessarily a programmer who can code or a network technician who can install networking and fine-tune networking hardware, but somebody who understands technology. So yeah, as a project manager, you need to be a technology person, and also you need to be a people's person. You need to understand people, not just individually. You need to understand group dynamics, how people form connections, political alliances within organizations, and so forth. Understanding of these two broad areas is related to the so-called socio-technical perspective, and it helps ensure success of projects within organizations. So this is the main idea that I'm trying to convey in this lecture. Now, to break down that main message into specific learning components, I would say the following. After completing this lesson, you should be able to explain the socio-technical perspective in relation to project management, especially IT project management. You should also be able to discuss various components of an organization. You should be able to explain how projects contribute to organizational success. Also, you should be able to distinguish between projects, programs, and project portfolios, and also explain the role of a project management office within an organization. So let's start with what I think is the fundamental concept for this class, and I would also say the information systems field as a whole. The so-called socio-technical perspective, also called system thinking or soft system methodology. There are many alternative names for this, I would say, philosophical perspective, which is nevertheless very useful and very practical, as hopefully you will see as we go through this lecture. So what do we mean by the socio-technical perspective? Well, just as the name suggests, it's a way of looking at things that integrates both social and technical elements. Okay? By technical elements, we mean something related to information technology, for example, like hardware, software. It can also be related to physical artifacts, physical engineering artifacts like air conditioning or electrical wiring. So those are technical elements. And then you have social. You also view the world as a combination of social elements. By social elements, we mean anything related to people, right? People, the way they think, their culture, their beliefs, the way they do work, the way they collaborate, the way they form alliances and connections within their families and organizations. So a socio-technical perspective is an approach that pays attention to both social elements and technical elements when solving problems, when carrying out projects, when making decisions. Now, I hope you will agree with me that success nowadays in business or in life in general depends on both social systems and technical systems, right? I mean, as an individual, to be successful in your career, not only you need to have technical knowledge, but you also need to be able to get along with people, right? Make the right kind of impressions on people, form connections, partnerships, to be successful as a professional, right? So it's not just the skills, the technical skills that you have that matter. It's also the social skills that you have. And sometimes people would argue that social skills are even more important, even in technical fields like information technology. And then if you're talking about running a project within an organization, then obviously success of that project depends both on technical and social factors. So for example, if you're delivering a software, an app that needs to accomplish a certain task, I mean, that app needs to work from a technological perspective, which means that the software, let's say, has to do what it's supposed to do in a fast, efficient, reliable manner, but also you need to attain success in that social area. In other words, you need to make sure that people are okay with that technological solution that you're implementing. And they may not be okay for a variety of reasons. For example, maybe they don't have the technical skills to use the technology that you have implemented. And you know, the technology can be fine, it can be working really well, but if people don't have skills to use that technology, then you cannot be successful with your project cannot be considered a success. And people may have other problems, like human problems in relation to the technology that you're implementing. For example, let's say it's a political reason. They resist this technology because they believe that it will shift power balance within the organization or make them lose their jobs or make them lose their power or influence. So to be successful as a project manager, you need to pay attention to both social systems and technical systems. And also, it's, you know, as I said, it's a broad perspective that, you know, takes into account interdependence of various social and technical factors, and also external factors, something beyond beyond the boundaries of the organization. For example, and I'm sure if you were in the technology field, you've experienced something like that. An organization funds a project. Let's say it's a long-term project that spans multiple years and commits financial resources to this project, and then something happens in the external environment. Let's say there's a presidential election and a new leader gets elected, and then because of the new approaches and policies of the new administration, the project gets canceled because, let's say, the funding is cut off, right? So that happens all the time. And again, as a project manager, you need to pay attention to those broader external factors as well. So hopefully I was able to explain to you what socio-technical perspective is and how it's useful in project management. Just keep in mind that sometimes there are different terminologies for this perspective, like system thinking or soft system methodology, but usually they mean pretty much the whole thing, that broad socio-technical perspective that takes into account the complex interdependence of socio-technical factors as well as external influences that may be imposed on the organization or a specific project as well. So that's what we mean by the socio-technical perspective. So some of the key elements of the socio-technical perspective. So when you're working as a project manager, you're working not only with technology, which means some, let's say, software tools that automate or implement certain processes, and, you know, not only with those tools and processes and their usability and accessibility, but also people, right? How does your technology impact people within certain roles, with certain responsibilities? What kind of skills and competencies they have or need to be able to use that technology? Also, you need to be mindful of the processes that are influenced by technology. So, for example, in different countries, things are done differently because of local culture, local traditions, government regulations. So whatever works in one organization or one region or one country may not necessarily work in all organizations. So you need to be mindful of how your technological solution influences processes and whether those processes are compatible with the solution that you're proposing or not. I remember one of the research projects that I worked on as a doctoral student at the University of Houston was PeopleSoft implementation at the University of Houston. And PeopleSoft, in case you don't know, it's that huge ERP system that is often used by big universities. And I remember when the consultant team came in to do the first feasibility study, that's what they did. They created like a huge booklet. I remember it had like 500 or 600 pages, and they listed all the processes at the University of Houston. And the table, it was basically like one big table. On the left side, they listed current processes, and on the right side, they explain how processes will be modified or replaced with the help of that PeopleSoft ERP system. So it's important to pay attention to processes as you implement technology. And also culture and environment, right? By organizational culture, we typically mean the beliefs that people have, how they do things, what they think is right or wrong. So you need to pay attention to organizational culture. Like, for example, some organizational culture value innovation, out-of-the-box thinking, while other organizations are more conservative. They want to mitigate risk. They want to make sure that risks are minimized. So depending on their culture, they may have a different attitude towards the project that you're proposing. And also, as I mentioned before, you need to pay attention to that broad external environment, because sometimes things happen that are outside of the organizational boundaries that nevertheless impact organizations and the projects that are being carried out within those organizations. So this is like an expanded perspective on the socio-technical view that lists some of the main elements that you'll have to pay attention to when you're implementing projects within organizations. Now, some principle of socio-technical design in relation to information systems or any other artifacts, meaning products or services that you're implementing as a result of a project. Socio-technical design focuses on joint optimization of social and technical aspects, right? So basically, both people and technology have to work together in unison. They need to support each other and create synergies. Like, for example, you can create a great mouse, but that computer mouse, but that mouse needs to have good enough ergonomics so that people can actually use it for prolonged periods of time. So that's one example of joint social and technical optimization. Another principle is stakeholder involvement and collaborative design. By stakeholders, we mean people who are somehow interested or impacted by the project. You need to get those stakeholders involved, because that's where you get that social perspective, right? You'll get different views and opinions on the processes, on the culture compatibility, and also those stakeholders may give you some ideas about the technical design as well, right? Because they know how things can or should be done or cannot be done within the organization that they're working in. So I remember once I joined an organization, and I didn't have much understanding of that organization, but one of the old timers came and he basically gave me an advice. He said, look, this organization is kind of slow, so whatever you're trying to accomplish here, divide it by 3, right? So he kind of gave me an advice to slow down a little bit with my work, because otherwise I'll be disappointed. I'll be trying to do too many things and none of those things will work out, or they will not work out on the time frame that I had in my mind. Also, flexibility and adaptability in systems. Things change. Things, especially, technology itself is very turbulent, right? Like every year we have new tools, new companies, but the social systems are even more turbulent, dynamic, and complex than that. We always have changes in people's opinions, people's alliances. So you need to design systems in a way where that complexity can be accommodated as things change. And also, another principle of socio-technical design that is important is transparency and clear communication, because that's how you connect to that social world, by being transparent what you're doing, winning people's trust and support, and also by communicating to people, you can get not only their human perspective, but you can also get ideas in relation to the technical design as well. There are many applications of the socio-technical perspective. I believe this perspective largely comes from engineering. I remember seeing some engineering textbooks from 1960s where they discussed the human factor in engineering. Like, I remember there was one specific book that discussed the bridge construction process, and the book was trying to make a point that the design of the bridge needs to be good from the engineering standpoint, but also people who work on constructing the bridge, they need to be in the loop as well. Like, for example, they need to follow all the procedures for pouring concrete. They need to obey other standards related to bridge construction, because otherwise the design can be great of the bridge, but still it will be constructed in a way that makes it fragile and vulnerable to earthquakes and other natural disasters. So yeah, there are many applications of socio-technical perspective outside of engineering, outside of the technology field. For example, when entrepreneurs, consultants, managers design and improve organizations, meaning companies, they understand that those are both technical systems that are meant to accomplish something, let's say produce software applications, but also they're social systems comprised of people and their connections. In healthcare, socio-technical perspective is very important. On the one hand, healthcare is a very technological and scientific field where treatments are administered by machines, where efficacy of medicine is verified by scientific trials. But then also, as a patient, you understand that the human side is very important as well, right? You want to be interacting with a doctor or a nurse who is not only very knowledgeable from a technical standpoint, but also compassionate, understands your emotions, understands your health concerns, right? So that emotional side is very important in healthcare as well. And the same thing about education. I mean, education is not just about drawing formulas on the board and spitting knowledge back and forth. It's also about connecting to people, really understanding them, learning from them through interactions, and also liking people, right? I mean, you need to like people in order to be able to listen to them, in order to be able to learn from them, to adopt their point of view. And this is also true in the field of information systems. That's the field that I'm largely in. And one thing that needs to be said is that information systems are complex socio-technical systems. So as a project manager, you're not just implementing technology, you're implementing complex socio-technical systems comprised of hardware, software, data, people who are using that hardware and software and data, and also all those elements such as hardware, software, data, and people, they're embedded with that broader organizational context comprised of certain processes, systems, hierarchies, and political frames. So when implementing information systems, you need to pay attention to all of these components and how they work together and how they're supposed to produce results. So up to this point, I already mentioned several times that working as a project manager involves implementing solutions within organizations. So what do we mean by an organization? An organization is an assembly or assemblage of people that work towards common goals and objectives. Okay, most organizations are characterized by a structure, that formal hierarchy that outlines departments, management levels, who reports to whom, who is above, who is below, how the lines of responsibility, accountability, and decision-making authority run through the organization, and so forth. Also, an organization is a combination of various resources, not just humans, but also financial resources, physical resources, technological resources. And also, organizations are characterized by certain culture and values. Culture and values basically means the things that people within that the shared things within the organization that people believe in, right? So, for example, one organization may have an innovative culture where people believe that innovation is important, it's the key for survival and success, while other organizations may have a culture characterized by risk aversion and bureaucracy, where the main point of the organization is to avoid risk, and that's why they have multiple level of authority of approvals. Now, a lot of people don't like it when there's bureaucracy, but we also understand that bureaucracy serves that purpose of double checking things, making sure that decisions are not made without considering multiple factors, but without considering risks, right? So those things will define the organization, and it will also shape what you can or cannot do as a project manager within an organization. As you know, there are many types of organizations. Usually when we talk about organizations here in this class, we mean business organizations, meaning for-profit companies. But we also know that there are many non-profits that have important agendas, important projects. There are government organizations, public organizations, related to local, federal government. There are educational institutions, which in my opinion, they're like hybrid organizations. They comprise both profit and non-profit components, government and private components. So there are all types of organizations, and they all carry out projects, and you need to be mindful of the type of organization that you're working in. Like, for example, if you're looking for quick decision making, generous funding of projects, most likely you're not going to find it in non-profit or public organizations, because that's not how they operate. Usually they have strict budgets, so they don't have unlimited funds to devote to your projects. While private organizations, they have more room for making financial decisions, but at the same time you understand that there's a downside to that. Business, private, for-profit organizations are driven largely by profit considerations. There's less stability there. They will cut projects if they believe that it's not going to generate enough profit for them. While government, non-profit organizations, they seem to be influenced more by long-term goals and considerations. So yeah, there are different organizations, they operate differently, and as a project manager, you need to be mindful of that. Now, another way to look at organizations is to look at the so-called frames of those organizations. So a lot of times people think of organizations in terms of the formal structural frame. The structural frame focuses on formal roles and responsibilities within the organization, how things are coordinated and controlled. So usually most people are concerned with the organizational chart, right? Who is the supervisor, who is the manager, who is the CEO, and so forth, right? So yeah, the structural frame is very important. You cannot, obviously, it's something that cannot be ignored. It's something that is very important for a project manager. That reminds me of one experience. I once worked on a project where basically it was a collaboration between a university and a military organization, right? Government military organization. And we met to discuss certain things, and our partners on this project, they were basically, I knew that they're from the military, but I didn't know who exactly they were. And they did not wear any military attire. And then I realized something. One of those people who were wearing just like a formal business suit, he was a general, right? And it took me some time to realize that, that's how they operate. Once the general says the final word, right? So once the general says something, the whole discussion stops. In other words, other people from the military, they don't continue the discussion because the general says the final word. And I had I kind of violated that by continuing conversation beyond the final verdict of the general, right? So it took me. I quickly realized that, but I at first I couldn't understand why they're looking at me like that, like why they're so negative towards me. And then I realized because I was not willingly but unwillingly challenging the authority of the general, who was supposed to be the main person on that project, right? So knowing who is the general and who is the lieutenant and colonel, it's very important. So yeah, so first you have the structural frame. Then you have a political frame. Political frame is similar to structural frame in a sense that it also comprised of certain lines of cooperation and authority, but those lines are informal, right? You know that within an organization sometimes formal structural frame does not tell you the whole story, right? So sometimes an assistant of the CEO, who is kind of outside of that organizational chart, has more influence on the organization and the CEO's decision than most people think, right? So a lot of people kind of ignore that. They will say, well, this is just an executive assistant, we should not listen to him or her. But wise people, they know that an executive assistant can have a lot of power, because this executive assistant puts the documents on the table of the CEO, arranges his or her schedules and meetings, right? So you can get a lot of things done if you're on good terms with an executive assistant of a powerful person within an organization. And then we also have the human resources frame. Organizations are not just technical systems, they're also social systems comprised of people. It's very important that there's harmony between those people, that they like each other, they respect each other, they trust each other, they work with each other well. And that's very important for accomplishing formal goals, okay? I remember one of the first feedbacks that I got as a manager from my supervisor was that I was treating people as if they were machines, right? And I remember he said something in my annual evaluation: we're not a factory, right? You cannot treat people as machines. And it was a good comment for me, because I think I was too young at that point and I didn't look at the human side enough. To me, people were like means to an end. In other words, my attitude as a manager was, you either do what I'm telling you, or you have to go somewhere else, right? And I didn't mean like in a bad way, right? I meant it like, well, I respect the fact that you're human, that you may have other opinions, you have other things to do. So if we cannot work together, I'll find somebody else, and you can go somewhere where you can feel comfortable as a human. So in that way, right? I wasn't trying to be mean to people or anything like that, but I didn't look at the human side enough. I didn't influence that. And my supervisor told me that, look, you need to look at people as people, right? You need to understand them. You need to listen to them, because we cannot afford to lose too many of them, right? We cannot have that approach where you're either on the same page with us or you have to go somewhere else, because you cannot fire 80% of your team, right? You can fire some, some people who are really asking for it due to low performance or sabotage, right? But you need to, you need to retain most of your team to get things done, right? So that changed my thinking, and I started paying more attention to people's lives, what bothers them, whether they feel comfortable or not with certain things as humans, okay? And then you have also the so-called symbolic frame. Symbolic frame. Certain things within organizations, they tell you a lot of things about the culture, about people there, right? Let me give you one example. The size of the office and the office location tells you a lot about the importance of that organization, right? And sometimes it's not the CEO who has the best office within the organization. Sometimes it's the founder of the company who has the biggest office on the top floor with a nice view, right? So those things tell you a lot about organizations, like who has the best office, the dress, like me and many other people, like they like to believe that dress is not important, right? That it's about your internal characteristics, your intelligence, your character, that makes you valuable. But dress also conveys certain things to potential clients. That reminded me of a story. I once had a friend who worked in finance, and I guess he was stingy or maybe smart, right? He didn't want to spend his money on an expensive watch. And he told me that he wore like a very inexpensive Casio or Timex watch, something like that cost like $50 or less. And his company was eyeing an IPO. So at some point they were working with investment bankers, and all investment bankers that came to talk to them, they had an expensive Swiss watch. So at some point the CEO told my friend, who was the CFO, he said, look, don't wear the cheap watch, because those investment bankers and potential investors, they may think that we're struggling financially as a company and you cannot afford a nice watch. And he kind of said no. He kind of dismissed it, saying, look, it's not important, I don't want to spend several $1,000s on a watch. So eventually he said that the CEO gave him a Rolex as a gift for his birthday, because he didn't want him to wear the cheap watch and convey that false idea that the company was not doing well, right? And I remember once when I lived in Abu Dhabi, I lived near like a financial district where they have a lot of banks, including Islamic banking institutions. And I remember I was walking once at night. I would, at night when it's not that hot, I would go for a walk just to exercise. And I see there's a sign that's, I forgot the name of this organization, but it says something like, International Investment Bank, something like that. So, the sign was very impressive. And then, like as I was walking by that company's office, the door, and overall like walls are made from glass, so you could kind of see inside. So I couldn't resist. I kind of looked, without entering, just from the street, I kind of looked inside what was happening within that International Investment Bank. And I saw that they had like, worn out furniture, dirty carpets inside. And I was like, well, I understand it's not about looks, right? But I would never bring my money to an organization that has dirty carpets and worn out furniture, right? It just, that symbol tells me that maybe they're not good at managing their own money, so that they cannot afford to have a decent, I'm not talking about luxurious office space, but at least couches and armchairs that are not dirty and they don't have holes in them, right? And also another story about symbolic frame. When I was an undergraduate student, I did an internship at a software company in Ukraine, and immediately I realized that this job was not for me. Basically they trained me to be an ERP consultant. I started learning their ERP system and immediately realized that their ERP system was not very good. It had a lot of bugs. I kind of said to myself, why do I need to learn it? There's no way they can compete with existing ERP systems offered by international companies such as Oracle. So I didn't like that idea of being an ERP consultant for that specific system. So I did my internship because it was required, and then I remember at the end they told me something, well, unfortunately we cannot offer you a full-time position here. And that was because I wasn't really motivated. I didn't get like a good test result at the end. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm okay with that. And when I exited the office for the last time, I saw a friend of mine in the parking lot who was also doing an internship there. And I told him like what happened, that I wasn't motivated to work in this organization. And he was like, oh, me too. There's no way I can work there. And I was like, why? And he's like, look at the parking lot. I'm like, so what's happening with the parking lot? And he says, look what kind of cars their managers have. And I looked at it, and most of the cars were kind of used, beat down cars, like not very expensive, not very nice ones. And he was saying, look, if you become a manager in this company, you will drive this old beat down car. So I don't want to be working here and trying to advance my career here, because the result will be not impressive, right? So I didn't even pay attention to what kind of cars they had in their parking lot, but my friend did. And to him, it was an important symbol that told him that this organization was not doing well, and he didn't want to be a part of it, right? So yeah, symbolic frame is very important. Paying attention to those symbols is very important for understanding organizations and getting things done within those organizations. Now let's zoom in on the structural frame, the formal organizational structure. There are many types of organizational structures, so we're going to look at some of the most common ones. I think one of the most common organizational structures is the so-called functional organizational structure, the so-called U form, where an organization is one single organism. However, it is comprised of certain departments like engineering department, manufacturing department, IT department, human resource department, accounting, finance department, marketing department, and so forth. Okay, and people work, within each of those departments. You can have a department head, and then people work within those departments. Like somebody works in HR, somebody works in IT. So this is a very common way of organizing an organization, the functional form. It's called functional because the organizational structure divides the entire organization into functions such as HR, IT, marketing, or departments. Okay. Now, some people think that, like a lot of startup companies or startup founders, they resist that kind of structure because they believe that it adds unnecessary bureaucracy. A lot of organizations like to say, oh, we don't have any functions, we don't have any walls within our organization, we're all one team. But you probably understand that there is a reason why people decide to divide their organization into departments or functions. And the reason is specialization, right? Division of labor. When people specialize in something such as IT or human resources, they become very good at it, they become more efficient, more knowledgeable. So you cannot have people who are, employees who are like, jack of all trades, doing everything for everyone, right? So there's a certain economic benefit in that. Also, it reduces the scope of management, like the vice president of HR, let's say, manages only HR people, right, directly, doesn't manage other people. So that creates certain economies of scope as well. So a functional organizational form, it's an old and true way of organizing people, and it creates a number of economic efficiencies and benefits. So a lot of organizations, especially like traditional manufacturing organizations producing physical goods, they follow that functional or U form. U form means like it's a unified company with departments. Then there's also project-based organization. Now, project-based organizations are very common among consulting companies, management consulting companies, IT companies. So they do have like certain hierarchy, whereas let's say there is like a chief partner or the CEO of the organization. But then the divisions are not within this organization are not corresponding to departments, but to specific projects, right? So one group of people works on project A, the other group works on project B, and then the third team works on project C. So this kind of project-based organization is very common among consulting companies. And then those projects, those project teams, they're fluid. Once project C is completed, some of the staff from project C will join project A, project B, or a totally new project altogether. So this is like a more flexible way of organizing people depending on the needs of the organization, depending on the projects that are currently happening within the organization. And then you have the so-called hybrid or matrix form, where it kind of combines the project and functional forms. So within matrix organizations, you have the CEO, and then you have departments, but the membership within those departments is kind of fluid. Project managers, they pool people from those departments if they need them for their projects. So this is sometimes hard to accomplish within a traditional functional organization, and it reminds me of some of my projects where I work on something, and then I go to another department and I tell them, look, I need assistance from your people, and then they will tell me like, who are you? Like, why are you asking, our people? We don't have any free people to help you out. if you need any kind of cooperation, go talk to the CEO. So I'll go talk to the CEO, and then the CEO will say, yeah, go ahead and comply with Vlad's request, give him what he needs. So that makes project management a bit difficult. Now, within these matrix organizational structure, there's more understanding that, yes, people work for specific departments or units, but they also need to collaborate on projects that span the entire enterprise, right? So, for example, a project manager working on project A would pull 2 people from the engineering department, 1 person from manufacturing, a part-time, meaning one half of a person, a part-time assistance from the HR department, and 3 people from the IT department plus 1 part-time professional that assists with the project, right? So that's the matrix organization that combines functional and project organizational structure. Now, in which type of structures a project manager has easier time carrying out projects? Well, probably in project-based organizations, where there is more understanding of what a project is, that it's fluid, that organizations need to dynamically assemble people and resources to get projects done. The functional form is probably the hardest organizational form to function in for a project manager, and then matrix is somewhere in the middle, right? It has certain characteristics of a project-based organizations, but then it also has certain functional limits, functional structures that prevent a project manager from being agile and flexible in relation to carrying out his or her project. So how do projects contribute to organizational success? I mean, some projects, they improve operational efficiency. For example, if you implement a CRM, customer relationship management system, that streamlines certain marketing processes, certain customer-facing processes, then you will improve operational efficiency. You'll be able to serve your customers faster. Some projects are carried out to improve financial performance. Let's say through automation, you'll be able to eliminate certain job roles, certain inefficiencies, and that will improve, cut down cost, or improve your ability to generate revenues. Some projects improve customer satisfaction, like for example, you implement a website that allows your clients to purchase your goods and services remotely, so that will improve their satisfaction. Some projects, they are related to strategic alignment, certain strategic goals that your organization is trying to accomplish. Let's say your strategic goal is to improve innovation, and towards that you will set up some kind of R&D office that experiments with new technologies to produce new products and services. And some projects, they contribute to organizational success through risk management. Let's say you will implement some kind of backup IT infrastructure that allows you to operate as a company when the main office is not functional, right? So you have like a backup IT department that has certain servers, and you are able to use those servers when there's something happening with the main IT department in the main office, right? So that's an example of a project that enhances risk management. Now, there is a terminology that explains how projects are organized within organizations. So by a project, we mean something specific, some kind of temporary effort with a specific goal, let's say to implementing a CRM software. Now, some organizations, they have bigger programs, and those programs, they comprise several projects. Like, for example, a bigger program would be improving customer loyalty, right? And within that big program, one of the projects will be installing a CRM system. Another project would be, let's say, training customer service representatives in customer service skills, right? So a program of improving customer loyalty will be comprised of several projects. And then an organization would have a portfolio. Typically, big organizations have portfolios of different projects and programs that overall help the organization survive and succeed within their industries. So portfolios means very high level perspective on projects. Programs means one level down, you're looking at groups of related projects. And then you're also dealing with specific projects, which means focused efforts to achieve specific goals. And within an organization, you would usually have like a project manager, then a program manager who's like a supervisor of other projects and other project managers. And then sometimes you would have like a project portfolio manager, somebody who coordinates all projects within an organization as if they were like one single department or unit. Also, within large organizations, you typically have something called PMO, which stands for Project Management Office. Project management offices, they typically have the following responsibilities in relation to projects carried out within the organization. First of all, they provide governance and standardization. By governance, we mean certain rules and policies that govern how projects are carried out and what project managers can or cannot do. They also try to standardize certain things by creating certain templates, certain procedures that all project managers need to follow. Also, project management PMOs, they assist project managers with resource management and support. They provide certain resources, certain administrative resources that a project manager might need. They also perform project portfolio management and alignment. They evaluate projects, they approve projects as they come in. For example, they may reject certain projects if they do not align with the strategic goal of the organization. They also do performance monitoring of various projects, and they also report to the main management, to the main person like the CEO or the top management team in relation to the status and success of various projects carried out within an organization. So those are the typical responsibilities of a project management office. Now, there are different types of PMOs within organizations. First of all, there are the so-called supportive PMOs. They provide support and guidance. So they're like a resource that assists project managers, and they don't have like direct authority or direct control over project managers. Then there are also controlling PMOs. They offer a high degree of autonomy, but they also have a high degree of, they allow for certain autonomy for project managers to operate as they see fit, but they also have a high degree of control, right? So through certain governance frameworks, right? So they will basically tell project managers what can or cannot be done. They will tell them to do something or stop doing something because of that governance framework, meaning rules or policies within the organization. And then you have the so-called directive PMOs. They directly manage and control projects by providing project managers. So in that case, a PMO is like a department where all project managers have to follow the orders of the head of the PMO, who can have a title of a project portfolio manager or project program manager, something like that. So different types of PMOs, they exercise different control over projects. And of course, if you're working where a PMO is more like a supportive resource, then you'll have more freedom and autonomy as a project manager. And if you're working for a directive PMO office, then you're working as a subordinate of the head of the PMO office, and your autonomy, your freedom to make decisions is minimal. So that completes our lecture on project management within the broader organizational context. Please pause on this slide and see if you can answer these review questions. If you can answer those questions in your own words quickly, that's great. If not, then you may have to go back to our chapter notes, or maybe you need to rewatch this presentation to make sure you have answers to those important questions that test your overall understanding of this lesson.
The juggle is real. I'm spinning these wheels, holding